Belly Conversations. Today is our first show, so we are going to start with a few introductions. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Terra Winston, a licensed naturopathic physician in Washington State. Dr. Terra graduated from Bastyr University in 2016 and spent her first 4 years in practice at Evergreen Center for the Integrative Medicine in Seattle. She's learned how to treat complex chronic illness and perfected her physical medicine skills. I'm excited to have her share her knowledge with us today. Welcome, Dr. Terra. Hi. And for those of you who don't know me already, my name is Lacy Watson, Integrative Health and Wellness Coach. I've been working in naturopathic medicine since 2008 as a medical assistant and became a certified health coach from the Integrative Institute of Nutrition in 2012. And then in 2015, I completed my undergraduate in complementary and alternative medicine with a focus on nutrition and aromatherapy. Together with our office manager, Monica Greedy, we are the Earth Naturopathic team. Our goal is to help you exit the medical matrix so that you can heal naturally and thrive. Today, we are going to chat with Dr. Terra and dive deeper into why she chose to become a naturopathic physician and how that differs from Western medical approach. So let's get started.
Great.
All right. So my first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in naturopathic medicine?
Sure. I always say that naturopathic medicine chose me. I always wanted to be a doctor when I was a kid. And then I sort of had some health problems, I would say starting in my early teens, like I was probably 12 or 13. And I actually started having stomach pain. And I went to my pediatrician who basically couldn't help me. I went to my mom's doctor who basically couldn't help me. And after several years of just sort of this progressively worsening symptoms and multiple doctors telling me there was nothing they could do, I sort of fell out of love with medicine. And I started thinking, well, if the only thing they're going to offer me is drugs for antidepressants, basically is what they were offering me for something that I feel like I don't have, like I have stomach pain, right? I wanted to understand my stomach pain. I was like, I don't want to be a part of that system. And so I went to business school, kind of let that dream die. And then I got really interested in nutrition because I was still trying to figure out my gut issues. And I also was not super impressed with conventional nutrition advice. I had a professor that really turned me off to the ADA when he said, if you're going to eat a candy bar, make sure you pair it with a diet soda. And I thought, if that's your nutrition advice, I'm not interested in this either. And so long story short, I ended up with a degree in food service management and business marketing, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I started looking for alternative nutrition schools, thinking if I could get a dietetics degree, then maybe I could open like some sort of like alternative bakery or food service something, because I loved baking at the time. And through that search, I found Bastyr, which is a naturopathic school that I attended. And I actually enrolled in school 2 weeks after finding them because it was like the light bulb went off. I was like, this is what I've been looking for all along. And the rest is history.
Do you still bake?
I do still bake. I love baking. Yeah.
Awesome. What's your favorite treat to bake?
It depends on my mood. Right now, I've been really into Dutch babies.
Yeah, yummy. So you talked about naturopathic medicine. How does naturopathic medicine differ from conventional medicine?
So it's different in almost every way. And it's a little bit hard to qualify sometimes. So conventional system is systems based, and they were founded in the early 1920s based on Rockefeller basically wanting to sell prescription drugs. And so everything the AMA does and the conventional system does is designed to make money. It's basically a big business. Whereas naturopathic medicine is rooted in history and health and nature, right? It's nature cure. It's really optimizing the body and with the understanding that the body will heal itself if it's given the conditions to heal. It's the biggest
Tell me a little bit more about the Rockefeller and what did people do before that?
So like before the 1920s, before the
Yeah,
AMA was formed? Yeah.
yeah.
So before the AMA was formed, there were no rules and regulations around medicine. It was sort of just a free for all. So there were conventional doctors at the time who were, like science based, I guess, if you can call it that. And they would give things like mercury and arsenic and all of these toxic plants to purge bloodletting and things like that. Barbaric surgeries without anesthesia. Those were your sort of conventional doctors at the time. And then you had your holistic doctors, so naturopathic physicians, oriental medicine practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, and they all sort of learned medicine the old-fashioned way, which was to shadow someone who was doing medicine at the time. And there were medical colleges, but they were all across the board like different. Some of it was with a year and some were 4 years, and what they learned in this actual schooling was very different and depended on the school. So one thing that Rockefeller did was he hired Abram Adams to write the I'm forgetting the name of the Flexner report. Abram Flexner. It wasn't Abram Adams. That was a different doctor from a different time. Sorry, my brain. Abram Flexner to write the Flexner report. And basically, this was not a bad thing, actually. What he did was he traveled around the United States and he kind of audited all of the colleges. And he basically said, here's what's happening. The education system is all over the place. There's no standardized practices. There's no certifications. Like, you don't know what you're getting when you go to a doctor. Like, you could be getting a really awesome doctor and you could also be getting like someone who like doesn't really know anything at all. And there was no regulation. So that part of it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But the way they manipulated it when they took it to Congress and said, hey, this is what's happening in our medical system, we need to standardize it, that's where things start to get a little bit corrupt. So they took it to Congress and they basically said, we need to standardize medicine. And so they formed the AMA. But the people who were in on forming the AMA were all these, rich bankers or railroad billionaires or whatever who wanted to grow their wealth further by getting into the new pharmaceutical industry that was just getting off the ground, right? So Rockefeller had bought a pharmaceutical company, knowing that doctors were just starting to discover vitamins and minerals, and he saw all these potentials to synthesize these things and then start selling them as supplements and drugs. And so that's sort of how that all went down.
I wonder why it is that supplements didn't get lumped in with pharmaceuticals and how they're not regulated.
Because you can't patent. So it all had to do with patents, right? So when the pharmaceutical companies came out, if they could get a patent on something, they could charge whatever they wanted for it and nobody could copy them, right? So that's how our medical system still runs today, is anytime there's a new drug that goes out, the drug company patents it and then no other drug companies can manufacture it and they can charge whatever they want. So they can charge $1,000 a pill if they want, and some do.
Wow.
Until that patent expires. And I think the patents are usually 10 years, at which point everyone can access that. But when the substance is natural, like a supplement, you can't patent nature.
Right.
And so supplements just became not profitable in that way. And so they don't care about them.
No, they don't. So where did naturopathic medicine come into play, and to where they had university, so that was outside of the conventional? Do you know?
Yeah. So after the Flexner report and the AMA was founded in like the 1940s or whatever it was, like sometime in the middle of 1900s, naturopathic medicine almost died because we didn't want to, like, our philosophy did not really align with the American Medical Association, and so they kind of stayed fringe. But the other thing that the Rockefellers and the Carnegies did was they started taking out ads, like negative, basically gaslighting natural medicine. And they started taking out like negative ads, almost like you see in politics now, to say like, oh, this doctor, blah, 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 blah. And they started creating public fear of these non-evidence-based, even though these therapies have been around for hundreds of thousands of years and they have proven track records of safety, et cetera, because there was no evidence, like double-blind placebo-controlled trials around these things, they started making the public fear them. And so a lot of naturopaths either were jailed or they were forced to close. It was almost like a witch hunt. They were forced to close their practices, or they just retired and were like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And there wasn't a lot of draw to go back into that field because why, right? You were just going to be gaslit, essentially. So it almost died, and most of the naturopathic colleges closed. And I think by the 1970s, 70s or 80s, there was one college, and it was NUNM, the school in Portland. There's now, I think, only 5, right? There's not a ton of naturopathic schools. But with that, it basically was enough to keep the profession alive. And then another school opened, another. And now we are licensed in, I don't remember, I want to say like 30 states now. So we still don't have nationwide licensure, which is a problem. So with the American Medical Association, they have something called parity. So like if I were to get a medical license in Washington State, I would have parity across the United States, and my license would be recognized anywhere I went. Simply because the idea is that there's standards of care, and as long as I am licensed in one state, it's expected that the same standards of care are applied in that state as other states. So in naturopathic medicine, our licensure is actually different in each state. So in Washington State, I'm licensed as a primary care physician. I can administer IVs, I can write prescriptions, I can hold a DEA license, so I can write for testosterone and things like that. I can't do Schedule 1 and 2 drugs, but we are actually working to push our licensure so that we can schedule or write those scheduled drugs. Why would we want to write scheduled drugs? Basically, so that we have the ability to take people off of them if we need to. So that's kind of a fun fact. If you're not licensed to prescribe a drug, you legally can't recommend someone go off of it. And a lot of what naturopathic physicians do is to help people come off of drugs that they've been on for a long time that may not actually be serving them very well.
So then does that mean you have to work with a medical doctor to get someone off of like a prescription medication?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. If they're on something that I'm not licensed to prescribe. Yeah. Or so in like California, for example, with their licensure, naturopathic physicians have prescription rates, but it's kind of like a physician's assistant. They have to have a medical doctor sign off on their prescriptions in order to write prescriptions. They don't have full rights like I do in Washington State. So every state is a little bit different, which means my license is only recognized in Washington State. I can't travel to, say, Arizona, who's also a licensed state, and use my license and practice there because there's not parity. So one thing that naturopaths have been really pushing for is to get all the states licensed, because once that happens, then we're more likely to be able to establish parity and be able to travel and practice across state lines.
Wow. So no, in Wyoming, they don't actually require you to have a license at all.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. So yeah, so in an unlicensed state, there are naturopaths that sometimes practice in unlicensed states, but their practice is very limited, right? It ends up being more of like a health coaching practice because you can't prescribe. Basically, in order to diagnose or to treat, you have to be licensed. So there's ways to get around it, right? Because a lot of the times, like, I don't even necessarily look for a specific diagnosis anymore, because the diagnoses were only invented in the first place so that a drug could be applied. And so for me, I'm like, I don't really care what the name of the symptom is. I just care that the body's expressing symptoms so that I can help you figure out what's causing that and then relieve them. Like, I don't need to put a name on that.
So that's why we have the ICD-10.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. And that's why you won't find a lot of things in the ICD-10, because if a drug can't be applied, then they don't really like to add it to the book. They're getting a little more, I guess, expansive now, because they can apply things like mental health counseling, and they can apply other surgeries and things like that to it.
So would it be possible, if say you were to live in a state like Wyoming and there's no license here, would you be able to go back to school and get your medical doctor degree and then practice as a medical doctor but as a naturopath?
Yes. Yeah, as long as I'm licensed, I can do whatever I want. And actually, some people do that. They'll go get dual license, and I have considered it. But I think about what benefits it would bring me, and it really doesn't bring me a whole lot of benefits other than that ability to bring people off of drugs.
Mm.
Like the skills that I have, I guess in Washington, because I do injection therapies and IVs, that's a benefit where like if I moved to Wyoming, I wouldn't be able to do injection therapies and IVs. Um, but how much does that really impact my practice and like the parts that I really love? And I think that the piece that actually like moves the needle for people is more in the education, which I can do that anywhere.
So what are some common conditions that you treat as a naturopathic physician?
So that's a big question. I mean, the answer would be anything, but what I really like working with is people who have more chronic conditions that really want to avoid drugs and surgery. So whether that's like joint pain or whether that's like gut pain, right? The gut's like that's my bread and butter because that's what I've been through. Like any gut symptom you can imagine under the sun, I've had it. And so I know how to help people navigate it. Like I don't even have to think about it. But I love working with like joints and, sports medicine and helping people really like get fit so that they can age more gracefully and feel energized and not like disempowered when they hit 60, 70, or 80.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how would you work with your patients to develop like a treatment plan for them? If they came to see you outside, say they'd never seen a naturopath before, what would you do to help them create a treatment plan? Would you focus on their gut even if they had like joint issues?
Yeah. So we together now have a whole process, and it's taken several years to get sort of funneled down into this process. So, as any doctor, I think when you first start out, it's like, okay, I have all these skills and tools. Like, what am I going to use? Right. And it's like, I grab whatever I feel like in the moment. Like, maybe I want this supplement for this person and this supplement for the next person. And there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. But as time goes on, and I think I'm in my 7th or 8th year now, you start to see patterns like, oh, okay, well, this thing works better for this type of person. And so I started to collect patterns and I started to ask the question like, what will make my job easier if I could just do this one thing? And what I really boiled it down to was there's 3 causes of disease. And if we could eliminate those 3 causes of disease, then I would eliminate disease. And it really wouldn't matter what the disease was. It could be a skin rash, a joint pain, a gut disorder, a mental disorder. It doesn't matter. If we wipe out the 3 causes of disease and we strengthen the foundations of health, then the disease goes away. And so I kind of called it the wellness model, and I started telling people I focus on wellness. But really, what it boils down to is we're maximizing our nutrients in. So we're getting the body to absorb nutrients, which requires good gut health, right?
Mhm.
Which a lot of people don't actually have, and they may not even know they have bad gut health, or bad diet, right? The second thing is toxins out. You have to be able to discharge toxins efficiently because our world is toxic. And most of the household products and personal care products that were sold on a daily basis due to billions of dollars in marketing are actually making us sick. And so we have to be able to get those out of our environment and then be able to discharge what we've already absorbed into our body, right? Which also requires a good functioning gut. And then the third cause of disease is stress. And if we can get the mind and the emotions in a place where we no longer harbor stress and we don't suppress it and ask the physical body to hold on to it, and we actually instead learn to like process it and let it go, then there's no room for disease to manifest. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I focus on the gut, and every single person I work with goes through an 8-week program to basically optimize their gut, simply because I need them to be able to absorb nutrients and discharge toxins. Yep. And then alongside of that, we're also working on the mind, right, with you and your coaching.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you approach mental health and emotional wellness in the practice and why group coaching and health coaching is important for your client's success.
Yeah. Well, I think the deeper I dive and the longer I've been in practice, the more I realize that almost every condition comes from the stress component, especially here in America, right? Like it's all cultural, but in America, we tend to wear our stress like a badge of honor. It's
Mhm.
like if we're not stressed out, we're not doing enough, or we're not doing something right, or we attach things to our beliefs about ourselves. Like if I'm not working hard enough, then I don't have value, or if I'm not doing XYZ, whatever. And so if we can get to those subconscious attachments that we've applied to our existence and our worth and our value, and we can let them go, then everything starts working better. And the pain that we hold in the physical body becomes dislodged and it can be released and discharged, right? But we also have to be focusing on getting proper nutrients in, because if you don't have proper nutrients, your brain can't function right in the first place. And we have to be discharging toxins, because if you have a bunch of heavy metals or mold or fragrances poisoning your system, your brain isn't going to work in a way that's going to allow you to get to that subconscious stuff. So there's a reason why we go through things systematically, and we focus on the gut first, and then we start getting into the mental emotional, because my goal for everyone is to not need me as a doctor, or not need any doctor for that matter. They're just learning how to live a life where they're free and they thrive pretty much effortlessly, as long as they are eating good foods and avoiding toxins and not letting stress um, affect their physical body.
Absolutely. So you keep referencing eating good foods. I know that you've been on a journey with your diet. Can you share a little bit of that with our audience of where
Yeah.
you've come and where you're at now? Are you a vegan? Most
Yeah.
naturopaths are vegan.
Yeah. No, I'm not a vegan anymore. I was a vegan. I was a vegan for 8 years. And it helped me at that time. It was my early 20s, and it was sort of my first jump into studying nutrition. I was like, wow, plant-based, cool. And it helped me for a lot of reasons. And looking back, I realized it helped me because I cut out dairy. And dairy is my primary food intolerance. And I didn't learn that till just a few years ago, actually. And so that time when I was vegan, I didn't realize how it was simply the dairy that had been poisoning me, that was making me sick. But long story short, as the longer I was vegan, the more my health started to decline in other ways. So not so much my gut pain, like that resolved when I cut out the dairy, but my muscle soreness and my exercise recovery. And I've always been a very active person. Sometimes exercising for several hours a day. And because I wasn't getting adequate protein, my muscles and my joints and my ligaments started to break down, and my skin health started to decline. And then eventually that led to poor gut health again in other ways. And so I realized that protein is an essential component of a diet. And now I really, really focus on helping people optimize their protein intake. And I do promote an animal-based diet. Um, and really, it boils down to quality of food more than anything. So, I don't love working with vegans. And at this point, I actually won't work with someone who isn't willing to change their diet if it's negatively affecting them. And so usually that means vegans are out because they're very staunch on their diet, etc. But if people are flexible in their eating, I think it doesn't matter so much. Like if you're staunchly on an animal based, or if you're staunchly on a paleo, whatever. I don't think that matters so much as the quality and your mindset, and how where you're at when you're eating the food. Are you stressed? Are you relaxed? Are you in a social type supportive environment, or those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite a journey. That's very different from going from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think people have a lot to learn when it comes to protein intake. I went to the Integrative Institute for Nutrition, and there was no one anywhere that told me I needed to have 120 grams of protein a day when I'm
Yeah.
weightlifting. I think it was like, I want to say it was like 25 grams of protein, which is not enough.
No.
It's
No.
crazy.
If you want to live a long life, and you want to be healthy through that life, and you want to be strong through like whatever apocalypse is going to hit us next, or whatever novel virus is going to come down the pipe, if you want your immune system to be strong, protein has to be your number one priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So That being said, how do you approach the role of genetics and epigenetics in health and disease? Because, that
Yeah.
has an impact.
Yeah. So I got really interested in genetics for a while, and I was having people do their NutriHacker and print all the things out, and we'd go through the SNPs, and I'd prescribe all these supplements, and nobody really got much better. It didn't really affect anybody that differently, and I even did it for myself, and I realized the deeper I dug into it, the more I realized, like, well, this gene counteracts this gene, and you shouldn't eat curcumin if you have this gene, but then curcumin's going to help you if you have this gene, and no grapefruit, and but do eat grapefruit, and everything was conflicting. And I thought, this, I don't think we actually know anything about genetics. And it led me into studying epigenetics and realizing that we actually are in control of our genes and we can turn them on or off with our simple lifestyle actions, which then brought me back to the foundations of health, right? If we're discharging toxins, we're absorbing nutrients, and we're not letting stress control our lives, our genes are going to do what we want them to do, which is help us be healthy and strong. And that might look a little bit different for you than it does for me, but I'm still going to be the healthiest, strongest version of myself if I'm focusing on those things and not like what supplements are supporting what genes.
Right, right. So what do you think of the MTHFR?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you think that has a role in mental health?
I think MTHFR has a role in, yeah, in health in general. But again, like when I run labs for somebody, I'm gonna check as part of my standard panel, I'm gonna check homocysteine and methylmalonic acid. And that's gonna tell me if someone is methylating. I don't care if they have the MTHFR gene, that means nothing to me. All I care about is their body methylating? And what I found is that if they're eating the right foods for their body, and if they are discharging toxins appropriately, their methylmalonic acid and their homocysteine are going to be in check, and they're going to be getting the right B vitamins and utilizing them for themselves. I think the problem with MTHFR comes that we've started supplementing all of our foods, or enriching, if you will, with shitty versions of B vitamins that don't actually work. And so we're clogging up all of our B vitamin receptors with these fake B vitamins that our body doesn't know how to use. And it's creating a lot of issues, which we now label as MTHFR and sell people fancy B vitamins to counteract it.
So do you think that people are actually taking too many supplements? Could it be that
Yeah, most of
somebody's
the
on
time.
the other end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of the
Okay.
time when I consult with somebody, I take them off of supplements.
So you don't prescribe a lot of supplements?
I do not like prescribing a lot of supplements. I view supplements in the same category as drugs. Most of them are band-aids. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a band-aid, but I find so many of my colleagues, and like I love them all. I'm there, it's not this isn't coming down on anybody. It's just my path of like what's true health and like how do we really get to the foundations of health. Um, if we're focusing and we're externalizing and we're saying this supplement is going to cure me or heal me, then we're failing to ask the question, like, why am I feeling this way in the first place, right?
Mm.
And so we're bypassing that mental emotional piece of like what's creating conflict or stress in my life that I'm not addressing. And then we're stuck on the supplement forever, which
Yeah.
isn't necessarily better than being stuck on a drug forever. Like if that works for you, that's great. But for me, I'm like, I don't want to settle for that.
Yeah, and that feels like the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. So, how do you integrate technology into your practice to support patient care? I know that you have a lot of different things that you work with, like ozone therapy. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
About ozone? Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I like to study like, okay, what are the cutting edge therapies, et cetera. And it ironically, it always comes back to actually the basics.
Mm-hmm.
So ozone is actually a really old therapy, and it used to be used in hospitals. They used to use it to sterilize things. So ozone therapy, you can use it in a lot of different ways. I would say most commonly I use it in an IV form. So it's called major auto chemotherapy. And basically what we're doing is we're letting someone's blood out, and then we're injecting ozone into the blood, and then we're giving the blood back to the person, right? So it's very safe. We're not injecting gas into anyone's veins. And what the ozone does is when it hits blood, or any kind of moisture for that matter, it splits and it creates oxygen and peroxides. So we all know what oxygen does in the blood. It basically just has an antioxidant effect, and it neutralizes free radicals. It helps our body process toxins. It helps it helps with respiration so that we can make energies and things like that. The peroxides work in a really interesting fashion, sort of on the immune system and on inflammation. So each one of our cells has something called a peroxisome, and it naturally releases peroxides into our bloodstream. And so those peroxides go throughout, and they are also free radical scavengers. They kill microbes, so viruses, bacteria, molds, fungi, anything that's living in our blood is poisoned by those peroxides. And that's really the job of the peroxisome. And so when we're supporting that, it creates sort of like an immune stimulation, if it will. And so you can have kind of a detox effect, and you can have a ramping up of the immune function and just overall better functioning of the body. So some people will have an experience of like they say the veil has been lifted, like brain fog goes away. And then other people will have an experience of like a detox, like a Herxheimer almost reaction, where they're like they get sore and achy, almost like a flu-like reaction, because they're discharging so much stuff. For me personally, the first time I did ozone, I woke up like 9 times in the middle of the night to pee. Like every hour I was awake going pee. And that's just how I know my body's detoxing. It's just a thing that I have anytime I have a major toxin discharge. And then the next day I felt like I ran a marathon. And then after that I was fine. So it's different for everybody. It kind of depends, but yeah.
Do you think that helps with anti-aging?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it can, because you're just boosting the antioxidants, right? So anytime that you can make the body discharge toxins more efficiently or have more nutrients, et cetera, you're going to be combating the aging process. There are other ways to apply ozone. So like joint injections for regenerative joint injections. Like if you want to like regrow your cartilage in your knee, you can pair ozone with like PRP and other sorts of regenerative injection therapies. I also like to use ozone rectally as like almost like an enema. It's just gas though, so it's not as uncomfortable as water for some people. It's really great at like killing fungus and parasites and all kinds of other yuck. But then also just like helping heal an inflamed gut, right? So if you're going through any sort of like diverticulosis, or if you have colitis or Crohn's or celiac or anything like that, or you have liver congestion, doing a series of ozone enemas is like really safe, and it can produce some pretty impressive results.
Wow, I have not heard of that one yet. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that being said, I'm sure that you come up to a lot of people who are skeptical. And how would you address skeptics who might doubt the effectiveness of something like ozone or just natural medicine in general?
Yeah. I don't care. Like people are allowed to be yeah, people are allowed to be skeptical. I'm not here to please everyone. I'm not here to be like Miss Popular. I'm really here to like spread the truth that I've found for myself to others who are looking for that same truth. And I found that it works. Like what the methods that I've developed over the years of trial and error, they work. And I'm in a place now where anyone who comes in to work with me gets results. And it took a really, really long time for me to say with 100% certainty that like, if I take you on as a client, you're going to get results. It used to be like, well, I don't know. I think I can help you. I have some things we can try, which I think is kind of what you're getting as a standard of care from most doctors. But now I'm like, no, it works. Like if you believe, right, you have to be able to believe that your body is a natural healing organism. If you don't believe that, these methods will not work for you, because you're not going to have the motivation to try to do the things that I'm asking you to do to change your diet and all that. You have to be willing to invest time and energy, because this is not a pill. This is not like a pill you're going to swallow in the morning and go on with your day. You are going to have to focus on and pay attention to what you put in your mouth. You're going to have to pay attention to what you put on your skin and what's in your home and all these kinds of things. So it's slow, sustainable medicine, right? It's like starting a crash diet. Like, sure, you can go get Ozempic or whatever the new fancy weight loss pill is and drop 35 pounds in a month. But is that sustainable? Like, are you going to be on Ozempic for the rest of your life? So that's the difference between like what I do and what someone else does, or like whatever the standard conventional whatever model is. Like if you have high blood pressure and you want to come off your blood pressure medication, I can help you do that. But you have to be willing to invest time, energy, and money into the process, right? If you don't have those things, or you're not willing to invest them into yourself, who's your number one asset, right? Then this program's not going to work for you. So you self-select out the skeptics who it won't work for. And that works perfectly for me.
I love that. I love that. That's great. And then they'll see the effects of the people around them who are actually doing the work, and they'll be like, "Oh wow, why are you doing so well and I'm over here not doing very well?" And that just
Yeah.
speaks for itself. Absolutely. So where do you see the future of naturopathic medicine evolving in the next coming years? The next.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. It's so our profession right now is split.
Hmm.
It's been splitting for a while, but there's a huge camp, and I would say the predominant camp. So I would say actually at this point, most naturopathic doctors are pushing to become part of the AMA.
Yeah.
They actually want to adopt the standards of care. They want to adopt the insurance model, and they want to practice like medical doctors. Why they didn't just go to conventional medical school is beyond me. I don't know, but that's the direction it's moving. And then there's the other camp of us. And I would say that there's probably like 30% of us that are actually vitalistic, holistic, root cause naturopathic doctors that actually believe in nature cure and all the things I've been talking about, that really want to help you understand how your body works as a self-healing organism and give you the tools to break free of the medical system and not need doctors and supplements and prescriptions and things like that. So I don't know. I think it's going to split. I
Yeah.
think there's going to be something that happens. And if naturopathic medicine does get absorbed into the AMA, then there's going to have to be a new school that comes about. And if us vitalists have a strong voice and we win out, then maybe there's hope for the profession to just continue on the trajectory it's on and create its own little niche. I don't know.
I see that happening too. Having worked in the different clinics I've worked in a variety of clinics that were integrative and would just pump out prescription pills. And when COVID happened, that is where I really saw the split was between the physicians who were pushing the shot and the physicians who were absolutely against it. And where do you find yourself in that camp? Do you find that you're an outsider when it comes to that?
Yeah, I mean, my stance from day one was I'm not afraid of this virus because I am a vitalist. Like I understand the immune system. I understand how viruses work, and I understand if you're healthy and strong and fit and you eat good food and all of those things, you're not going to succumb to a virus, whether it's
Yeah.
new or not. You might get sick, but you're not going to die. Like it's going to be a cold, right? And that's what happened. Now it's like quite clear that that's what happened. And when it came to the interventions such as the vaccine, for me, I was in the informed consent camp. Like from my perspective, my job, and this is with anything that I do for a patient, my job is to give you the information, not to make the decision for you. So I had people coming to me saying, I definitely don't want this. This is not for me. I'm scared of it. I don't know enough about it. And I supported them in any way I could. I wrote letters, I talked to employers, whatever. And then there was the other camp of people that were like, I'm so anxious. I want to be the first in line for this shot because it feels like it's going to save my life. And I did my best to educate them around what we did know and what we didn't know, and then also support them in their decision to get the shot. And if that's what worked best for them, I would also support them in the aftermath of all of the side effects that they then had to endure, which most of them did. And it's just my job to hold space and to again be the voice of reason and also give people the information that they might not be getting from the general public or public health, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that being said, how do you keep up with all the current research? Do you take a time out of your day? Do you take like a chunk out of your week to keep up with all that current research that's going on?
Yes and no. So research, in my opinion, is mostly junk. It's mostly garbage. Almost all studies these days are manipulated, and there's been lots of things that have come out in the last couple of years showing that like even our peer review process has been corrupted. So a lot of the journals that are publishing papers, like they were never actually peer reviewed. They just had peer review signers or whatever. And if they didn't fit the agenda, they weren't published. And then also, and this is probably the most key, is the research mostly is funded by the pharmaceutical companies that are trying to sell a drug. So that's another reason why research is not always the best option, because research studies are very, very expensive. And how are you going to pay for a research study if you're not making billions of dollars selling something in return, right? So these drug companies fund these double-blind, placebo-controlled research studies. And if the outcome isn't what they want, they manipulate the statistics so that it is what they want. And if there's no way to manipulate the statistics so that it shows some outcome that they want, they just don't publish it. So there's hundreds of thousands at this point, probably, of studies that have been done that actually show that certain drugs are dangerous, if not ineffective, and they never go to publish. And I can't even see them as a physician if I want to, because the person who funded the study decided that they didn't want that information out in the world. And so when you have that kind of lens, it's really easy to like take a headline or a study or something and say like, no, I see right through this. So what I find myself going back to is basic knowledge of sciences and the body. And then also understanding that like what we think we know about the body is very, very limited. Like we don't actually know a whole lot about the body. I've learned some really interesting things in the last few years that make me question everything I learned in physiology and biology. And so it's just that like, does it feel right? Does it seem congruent with what I know and see and have had like proven time and time again on myself and my family and working with patients? And then like, because I do want to stay somewhat informed, you know, like I subscribe to certain journals and things like that. And then I kind of skim. I do not like read hours of research every day, but I just skim like what's coming out. And I'm more of a book reader, if I'm being honest. So if there's a topic I'm really interested in, like I dive into the books on that topic and like learn everything I need to know or learn everything I can know about it. And then I'll follow the research on that topic as it comes out.
Yeah, I've noticed that about you. That's one thing I really appreciated about you, that and one of the reasons I came to work with you was because you are a book reader and you read something before you actually make a decision, and I really appreciate that about you. And that you're continually learning. You're always learning, and that I just love that, and it really shows in our program, the Calm Belly Method, that you do your homework and that you really are interested in science and the body, and I think it's great. So lastly, what advice do you have for people who are interested in natural health and wellness and getting started?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Like the thing that I think I always go back to is find somebody who embodies what you're looking for. Because I think the mistake that I see made, and this isn't like in any field, right, is that we just go to somebody because they have a title. And it's like, well, you're a doctor, so you must know. And you have to remember that that doctors are humans. We're just people and we're doing the best we can. But some people might be putting in a lot more effort than other people. And there are colleagues that I have out there that have not studied a day in their life beyond like passing their board exam. Right. And like we have requirement for continuing education, but I'm telling you, you can go to these conferences and pay for credits and not actually pay attention to anything they say.
Yeah.
And so if you really want someone who's going to help you understand, like get clear on what your goals are. Like what goals do you have and why, right? You have to be really clear about your what and your why. So if you have gut issues like I had, like be really clear, like what do you want to your gut to look like? What do you want your digestion? What do you want your relationship with food to look like? Get really clear on that. Then get clear on your why. Like why is it important, right? Like what's your life going to look like in 10 years if you do nothing? What's your life going to look like in 10 years if you take option A versus option B versus option C? And then once you do that, then you can figure out like the who, right? Like who can help me get there. And I think that's where like for me, and why we've built this coaching program, like I like picking people who are 2 steps ahead of me. Right. Like I want to pick the person who's already done what I'm trying to do. That's why I hired my business coach. That's why I hired my life coach. That's why I hired, all these coaches that I have to help me is because I'm like, I see where you're at and I want to get there. So, and I know you've been there and you have the path lined up. Right. So that's like what we try to do in our program is like, here's the path and here's what results we can guarantee on this path. If those results are in alignment with what you're looking for, great. And if they're not, that's okay. Like there's someone out there that can help you get to wherever you're trying to go. You just have to be really clear about what it is you're looking for so that you can find the right person for you.
I love that. I love that. And I have taken that myself, and I really admire you, and it's a pleasure to work with you, and it's really cool that we get to start doing this podcast together, and I'm just really thankful that we have our program, and I continually learn from just this process and our clients, and it's been really great. So
Yeah.
I think that we have a lot of value to bring to the world. And with that, that's all the time we have today. But thank you so much,
Yeah.
Terra, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with all of us. And if you'd like to learn more about naturopathic medicine or work with Dr. Terra and I, please be sure to visit our website, www.drterrawinston.com. And thank you for tuning into the Calm Belly Conversations. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.